All right, guys.
Welcome to the Deer Shop Podcast, presented by Siman Brothers Outdoors and the Leaky John Boat Company.
Your track job was the first fun track job.
Oh, that was the best.
That kind of like, I think part of my life was influeed by that night.
Looking back on it, my biggest regret was opening day. I knew where it needed to be. I should have just done a simple hanging bank off the corner of that field, and he would have been toast. But I didn't.
That was our first public land deer hunting trip, and it went extremely well.
5 years ago, we couldn't shoot a deer at 100 yards with a slug gun. Now you're shooting turkeys at 100 yards with a shotgun.
It was a 90-yard shot pass through.
And then you miss him 3 times with a rifle at 70 yards on video for the whole world to see.
Yeah, that's what Caleb did.
This is the first buck I've shot in over 10 years. And, not to get too crazy emotional about it, but like
10 years, no buck. Well, all right, guys. Deer Shop Podcast, episode 65. Today, we have an interesting one for you.
Yes.
This is going to be the full rundown on the C.J. Alexander poached buck story saga. Just a few days ago, he pled guilty to 14 out of the 23 charges. This podcast is going to be entirely quoted articles from Outdoor Life. We're going to read off the actual court documents and then actually a conversation that we had with CJ himself via Instagram, which is kind of why we're doing this podcast. We mentioned CJ earlier. I don't even remember what episode it was. We mentioned the case.
It was probably it was the Kentucky episode, wasn't it? I think it was the first hunt episode. So we wouldn't normally do something like this.
No, I mean, we like to hit recent topics a little bit in the intro to a lot of our podcasts. And, in one of our podcasts, it was completely unrelated to anything. We kind of talked about this a little bit, put it in the title, and it got a lot of views on the streaming and on the YouTube channel. And it's actually still getting views on the YouTube channel. Obviously, CJ Alexander is a hot topic. It just so happens that he himself and everyone that's followed this case knows he's been very vocal about everything about this case. He's been online defending himself, commenting on things, putting out statuses, getting in arguments with people. He has a lot of people that are backing him up, which is very interesting.
Yeah, so the whole point of this podcast is, the Deer Shop podcast in general, is to talk about things that we would talk about in the deer shop here.
Yeah.
So that this is super relevant to what's going on right now and pretty local to us as well.
Yeah, it's not very far from us, and the fact that he started a dialogue, reached out to us because he saw our other podcast where we briefly mentioned him and then gave us a conversation piece.
Because that podcast wasn't even fully about him.
No, not
it was
at all.
Just kind of an update on what was going on, and we just happened to talk about him a little bit.
This podcast, though, is fully about him, though. So I'm just going to start off by, if you're watching this, you're either a fan of us or you're involved in the CJ case, so you already know. Brief rundown. The deer that he killed ended up scoring 206 and change, 206 and 7/8, which would make it the number 3 all-time typical buck in the history of the world. After he killed it, he went on some podcasts and some social media stuff, and doubt started to spread. So
was it officially scored?
Yes.
It was officially scored for the record book
for the Buckeye Big Buck Club. Mike Rex himself scored the deer.
Okay.
It's in this article, which I'm just going to start by reading the original Outdoor Life story of the hunt. So we will just begin right at the beginning when CJ Alexander interviewed with Outdoor Life and told them the story of his hunt.
So this was the first company that he went to was Outdoor Life?
This is, I don't know if they were first or if the Hunter podcast was first, but I know Outdoor Life published the story, so I am going to read it directly off of their website.
And this is 2023, correct? Last season or 2 seasons?
2022, I believe.
So 2 deer seasons ago.
Yep. All right, so quoting CJ himself telling the story to Outdoor Life. This season was kind of messed up for me, Alexander tells Outdoor Life, explaining that family commitments left him little time to scout for deer. He'd also sold his compound bow last year to bring in some extra money. I bought a crossbow I figured the whole family could use this year, and that literally blew up on me a couple days before I was planning to hunt. Luckily, his buddy Corey Hounert, I'm not sure exactly how to say Hounert,
probably,
lent him his crossbow and a portable climbing stand. In the pre-dawn hours of November 9th, Alexander shimmied up a tree overlooking a chunk of his sister's 30-acre property, where 2 woodlots meet where two woodlots meet near a few small ponds. He was committed to an all-day sit, and with a cold front rolling in, he was expecting some serious action. Instead, he saw just 4 or 5 deer all day. I forgot my phone and was bored as hell, honestly, Alexander says. I really thought I wasted my time coming out there. During his 11th hour in the stand, Alexander was watching a doe idly browse when he was snapped to attention by a sound he'd never heard in the deer woods before. It sounded buckish, but was hard to identify, and after 10 minutes passed, he heard it again. Normally, you kind of had to be listening to hear a buck grunt, but this was loud, like almost a roar, he says. This time I peek around the tree, and at about 125 yards, I see this buck step out. Instantly, I'm floored and thinking, holy shit, what is this thing? It took a full hour for the buck to travel the 100 yards from where it stood to an open spot on the trail alongside Alexander's stand. At just 7 yards, the buck cleared the brush and offered Alexander a perfect broadside shot. What followed was a nightmare. I made an absolutely god-awful shot, he says. I don't know if it was so close I was holding on the wrong spot or if I just got buck fever or what. I have no clue. The buck ran towards the pond to where the doe had been, and for a while it just stood there with its back hunched and tail tucked. Alexander knew he needed to get another arrow in the deer, but as he reached down for the bag containing the cocking string, he realized his safety harness buried under layers of clothing was preventing him from reaching it. I was tied in, too. It wasn't like I could unclip a carabiner real fast, Alexander recalls. It was holding me up too high, and I just couldn't reach down. He popped a boot in the stirrup of the crossbow and desperately tried to cock it with his bare hands, but was unable to draw the string far back enough to load a bolt. The buck began to move again, working into the brush before reappearing on the trail. It walked past Alexander's stand at just 12 yards. All he could do was watch. I figured the best thing I could do was keep an eye on him and plan out where I was going to start tracking him in the morning, Alexander says. Back at home, Alexander called Hanert, his buddy who loaned him the crossbow, and they decided to back out for the night. I FaceTimed Corey and told him I shot a deer, and then I just broke down crying. Corey was like, hey man, what's wrong? And I told him it was the biggest deer I'd ever seen, and I'd hit him bad. The pair met at the property the next morning and began their search. Alexander was worried the buck had left the 30-acre parcel, which would further complicate things. In Ohio, a landowner has no obligation to allow a hunter to recover game from private property. But as they approached the spot where Alexander had last seen the deer, Hanert froze. Corey starts sniffing the air, Alexander says, like audibly sniffing the air, and he goes, do you smell that? That smells like a running buck. That smells like a musky deer. As the two stood there, Hanert saw Alexander glance over his shoulder towards the ponds and do a double take. Hanert's eyes followed Alexander's gaze to where a white belly and a mass of antlers lay beside one of the ponds. The pair ran over to the deer, high-stepping and splashing through the water. Corey just kept saying, CJ, you have no idea what you just did. You have no idea. He acted like I'd shot Bigfoot. The aftermath of shooting a big deer is pretty universal. The deer gets loaded into the back of someone's pickup, driven by the homes of friends and family, and eventually the parade ends at the taxidermist. There's a lot of picture taking, a lot of storytelling, and a lot of celebrating. Ohio's Big Buck Club secretary Mike Rex gave the buck a green score of 206 and 7/8 inches. If that score were to hold up to the Boone and Crockett scoring panel, Alexander's buck would become the number 3 all-time typical whitetail ever taken in North America, and the number 1 typical whitetail in Ohio. Regardless of his shot at a North American record and the thousands of dollars it would add to the value of his deer, Alexander doesn't think he'll submit the buck for Boone and Crockett scoring. He says he's too worried the club will score the antlers unfavorably because of the record book politics surrounding a feature called the common base. A common base describes 2 tines that emerge from the same base. We've gone over that extensively in the past.
King buck issue.
Yep,
right?
Johnny King buck, yep. Actually, the Johnny King buck's listed in here as an example of that. Assuming the buck's net green score of 206 and 7/8 inches held him through the 60-day drying period, which is unlikely because of some amount of shrinkage is natural, its net typical score would fall to 191 and 4/8 inches after adjusting for the common base deductions. This would drop the deer from its potential spot as the new Ohio State record to number 8, which, I mean, still.
So, but it never got to this point. Correct?
No, so following that, that's the story of the original hunt. That's pretty much in line with the story he told on the Hunter podcast, and I know he made some other appearances.
So a pretty cool story overall. You read that. When you're sitting there reading your magazine, you read that story, you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Pretty believable.
Yeah, so I think a couple of key features from that article that I'm gonna hold on to. Forgetting his cell phone. He says he forgot his cell phone, and he's hunting
Which plays a huge role later on, we find out.
And he's hunting his sister's 30-acre property. I'm
So
not sure of the exact date.
when did it go wrong?
So the deer was confiscated in December of 2023.
Okay.
Outdoor Life's follow-up article. Alexander was indicted on 23 criminal charges in June for allegedly poaching the buck, which was also in the running for third largest whitetail all time, Boone and Crockett record books. Alexander had maintained his innocence after the ODNR launched an investigation into the buck, and he doubled down on his innocence after his criminal indictment was handed down by the Clinton County prosecutors in June. Alexander shared his story, the hunt behind the Alexander buck, which I just read, in December, a little over 2 weeks before the antlers were confiscated. He told Outdoor Life that he killed the 200-inch buck using a borrowed crossbow while hunting his sister's. On here it says 9-acre property. The other one said 30.
Mm-hmm.
So the original article said 30. This one says 9. But he maintains his story.
So what are do we know the events that led up to like the investigation starting?
So I don't
why
know.
they
I know there was a lot of conjecture online, especially after the Hunter podcast, but I believe the people that own the property where the deer was actually killed at, he pled guilty to killing a deer at a separate property, and it's in here. I think those people, I would assume, asked the ODNR to launch an investigation.
Because I remember when it was posted on Facebook and like when the Hunter thing came out,
people lost their minds.
There's
instantly.
people right away saying, "Oh, there's no way he shot that deer where he said he shot it."
Yeah, I know he posted it
here.
like on Ohio whitetail deer and stuff, like Facebook groups prior to the Hunter podcast, like right after he killed it. And there was a bunch of people saying that there was just no way that he killed it at his sister's property.
Because they had trail camera proof of it being like, 20 miles away, something like that.
And we'll definitely get into the trail camera part of it here in a second. But this Outdoor Life article about the indictment says that the documents, his story, which is written documents, and particularly the cell phone records contained within, give a shape to an elaborate scheme in which Alexander sought out and killed the 200-inch plus buck known as the Alexander buck on November 9th, 2023 on private land where he knowingly did not have permission to hunt. They show how after Alexander killed the trophy buck with a crossbow, he recovered the illegally harvested buck with accomplices and then staged its taking on his sister's property so he could profit off the deer, mislead investigators, and become the hero of his own hunting story. These cell phone records were obtained through a search warrant and provided to Alexander and his defense attorney as part of their request for discovery. Before we go any farther, I will read off the top 5 counts that the grand jury came down with for this case. Because there's 23, but the top 5 are the ones that are pretty damning. The first one was actually a charge for jacklighting. So
this was the year prior, correct?
Yeah. So in September of 2022, in the parking lot of Cornerstone Baptist Church, this is count 1 grand jury, 225 Randolph Street, City of Wilmington, in Clinton County. Christopher Alexander did throw or cast the rays of a spotlight or other artificial light into a field, woodland, or forest for the purpose of locating a wild animal, namely white-tailed deer, in violation of Ohio Revised Code, Title 15, Section blah, 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 which prevents spotlighting. He actually sent me the video on Instagram of him spotlighting this deer in the parking lot. I have the actual video.
So
he's taking a cell phone video, shining his headlights on the buck in the parking lot, and he sent me that video.
This was after he was found guilty, correct?
Yeah, he sent me that video before he was found guilty and after he found guilty. He said and we'll get to his conversation with me, but he also sent pictures of that said buck dead during daytime hours laying in the woods, which I don't know what that proves exactly, but
So this indictment was for 2 separate years for the buck prior and the larger buck?
while they were investigating the very large buck,
They found out
about more deer. The cell phone records prove that he had also poached other deer. So that, while trying to solve the one case, they opened up a couple more cases. Count 2, Christopher Alexander at the property of Landrum Oil, and he gives an address, which is 49.985 acres. I won't give the address on here. You can read it.
It's all public record.
Yeah, Christopher Alexander did hunt a wild quadruped, namely white-tailed deer, within the state without procuring a hunting license. The next charge, which is all the same stuff, same location, did hunt a white-tailed deer on lands of another without first obtaining an annual deer permit. Then we go down to count 4, all the same stuff before that. C.J. Alexander did hunt upon lands of another or shoot at, catch, kill, injure, or pursue a wild animal thereon, namely white-tailed deer, without obtaining written permission from the landowner or the owner's authorized agent in violation of title.
So he did this all
section.
without a hunting license. Or without
So basically, it boils down to he was hunting without permission on a property without a hunting license or a tag and harvested a deer, which I don't. He never and I'm going to next I'm going to start reading our conversation with Christopher via Instagram, and then we can conjecture about the whole thing. But in our conversation with CJ Christopher, he didn't ever mention the fact that he never brought up the fact that he didn't have a license or a tag. That was something that he avoided conversation about. He does talk about not having permission or supposedly having permission, but
he kept saying that there's 3 sides to every story.
Yeah. Okay, so we did that earlier podcast that we talked about, and then CJ actually replied to our Instagrams, started direct messaging our Siman Brothers Outdoors Instagram, and he started off with
real defensive.
Yeah, well, I mean, not too bad, but you guys were so off on your YouTube video, it's insane. I shot both those deer legally, never spotlighted anything, LOL. I get you want views, but know what you're talking about before you put something out. Direct quote, CJ Alexander. Our reply. We asked you to come on and talk about it on Facebook before the podcast. A lot of guys are interested in your case. All we can do is speculate until it's resolved. CJ's reply. The spotlighting charge was for being parked by the church by my house picking up my son, and I seen a 130 to 140 Class 8 and turned the headlights on and look at it. I have the video on my phone and can literally shed hunt the property right beside it with Corey. So I sent it to him. I'll send the video when I'm done working, and I posted a picture of my 8 dead in daytime like a week ago. So then I replied, I hear ya. Like I said, very captivating. Everyone with the platform has been talking about it. Obviously, we can only go off what you post or what the state releases in the court docs. And the court docs paint a pretty bad picture for your story is all. That was me. CJ's response to that. He actually sent me that spotlighting video, and then he sent me a trail camera video, a Moultrie trail camera video. It looks like it's on a power line or something of said 200-inch buck. And I'm still not sure the context of the video. He had
something about a stick, right?
Something about it. No, the stick was from the trophy picture, but he also posted. He zoomed in on the body of the deer, saying, somehow proving that he shot it in daytime and that it was wounded. But I did not see anywhere in the video where the deer was wounded. The deer does run kind of hunched, but I don't see any blood. There's a small, it looks like a burr in his butt.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't see any blood or any blood pouring out in the video. But supposedly he was using that as evidence. CJ's response after he sent the pictures and the video. That's their job. They wouldn't be doing it if they didn't. Sorry, I'm trying to read it exactly as he quotes it, which is kind of hard. That's their job. They wouldn't be doing it if they didn't. Stuff taken out of context can be made to sound bad. There's 3 sides to every story. My side, their side, and the truth. Just how it goes. So then I asked him when the next part of the trial is. He says, it's not even at trial yet. It's still in preliminary hearings. They offered a deal, and I'm seeing if I am going to take it. Laugh out loud.
So this conversation took place 1 or
2
2
days before he pled guilty. I replied, do you get to keep the rack with the deal? That's the only one I would take. And then...
So speaking of that for 1 second, at one point he sold the rack, correct?
Yes, he sold the rack to an antler collector. I don't know if it was Mike Rex. I don't know if it was... So
that had to be right prior to being confiscated?
Yeah, he sold it pretty quickly after he killed it.
Okay.
I think... I heard multiple stories. I heard he sold it for $30,000. I heard he sold it for $20,000.
But in the Hunter podcast, he had it there with him.
Yeah. And then... I do believe that I did hear that he gave the money back to whoever he sold it to. The money that was given to him, he gave it back when all this stuff went down and the state confiscated the rack. I believe I heard that on Hunter. It's hard to keep all this stuff.
Made the charges much worse because he profited off of it.
Yes,
correct?
Yep.
It'd be a lot different if it was hanging in his house.
Right. So then after that, exchange, he did plead guilty. Outdoor Life article, a couple of articles. I sent him the articles and screenshots of the counts. And I said, and I actually didn't even, I said something along the lines of Does it, what changed to where you had to plead guilty? And his reply was, LOL, you think that changes my perspective or outlook at all? When you kill a 200-inch deer and know what goes on, come talk to me. I'll tell you that to you through this platform or in person, and doesn't tell the story, not even close. Like I said, it's their job is to make it look a certain way. That's their jobs, doesn't make it the truth. This is after he pled guilty. He replied to me this. And it's funny because there has been 200-inch bucks in this shop. Three different 200-inch bucks have been in the shop that we've done, podcasts and talks on. Luke killed one here on our farm. Mm-hmm. Dylan killed a 206 not very far away. Joey killed 199 bankrupt, not far away. So, CJ, I understand that scrutiny comes with deer, and there was obviously some controversy with all three of those deer that were killed, but we're not exactly strangers to very large deer being killed by people in our family or people we know, and the controversy that comes with it. So kind of off base there. He goes on to continue saying, just like this gets you charged for spotlighting, sent me the video again of him in the church parking lot. LOL. Willing to bet any amount of money y'all have done that, and guess what? That's against the law. Same thing. Poached, but have trail camera pictures of him after I shot him and other before that batteries I changed midday corn. I carried out 8 bags at a time with Corey, middle of daytime. You can assume you know what's what, and that's fine, but let's be honest. The only people that do, you wouldn't know or talk to. Everyone can hate, everyone can talk shit. It is what it is. I was wrong for telling a different story. Absolutely did I move the deer someone I had written permission? Absolutely should I done that? No, I shouldn't have come, but can't change the past, but you know the facts. But you don't know the facts.
No periods in that
no
entire
periods. That's verbatim, word for word, his wording. Basically admitting that he moved the deer, told the wrong story. It's all over the place. Also, the deer before on the same piece of land in daytime, yet I spotlighted them, snuck on the same piece for 2 years right next to their house and was never seen over 120 days out there. I mean, do the math, LOL. Also, Donald Trump is a criminal and a felon. I mean, that's the quote right there.
Add that little one at the end.
He's basically saying that he was on this piece of property for 2 years, over 120 days, next to their house. They never saw him, and Donald Trump is a criminal too. So I don't know what you were trying to prove with that statement. That, to me, that's incredibly incriminating. And we'll talk about that later. But I replied, listen, man, you pled guilty. Why are you still trying to state that you did nothing wrong? I'm just confused. Followed by CJ's reply. Did I state I did nothing wrong? Because I must have lost that in translation. I said I told the wrong story and I moved the deer and was wrong, shouldn't have done that. As far as hunting the deer, hunted it by legal means, killed him legally, had verbal permission, have the dude's cell number in my phone, LOL ? If you think for 1 minute you'd spend $30,000 on a trial, if you were in my shoes, you're out of your mind. If you think the system is perfect and everyone found guilty is guilty, you live under a rock and know absolutely nothing about the criminal justice system and definitely need to stick to deer. Like I said, there's 3 sides to every story. You want me to be the bad guy and you want me to have spotlighted it, but that's just not the facts. You and everyone else can paint whatever picture you want, but doesn't make it true. I'll tell you this as well. If you've ever shot a deer and it's went over a property line, you've done the same shit and guilty of the same thing. If you've ever fished without a license or in a pond or somewhere you weren't supposed to, you're guilty of the same thing. Don't throw stones from a glass house. Difference is mine is public, LOL. We both know if it was a 120-inch deer, nothing is said, and it's about the deer and conversation. Conservation, right? ? And that's the last reply that he gave to me.
Trying to understand from that.
So basically, that's a big, long, rambling statement. I can already picture. I don't want to generalize, but I can already picture the way it is. He's a guy that, unfortunately, through his upbringing and the way that he lives his life, he minimalizes trespassing, fishing without a license, going over property lines. We've met many, 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 many people like that. My reply to him was, CJ, we film everything that we do hunting and fishing wise. Have we ever broken laws here at Siman Brothers Outdoors? Of course we have. whole, have you ever sped? Have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? Yes, we are not perfect people by any means, but we love the wildlife. And ever since we've started to run trail cameras and put everything out there for the public to see, you have to be legit. You have to buy all the tags. You can't get caught trespassing. If my picture was out there trespassing on someone's property, it'd be very, very bad for our brand, our business, the whole 9 yards.
We wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff anymore.
This case actually made me go get written permission from all the landowners that I have verbal permission from for all these years, just in case, we do kill some crazy buck and someone starts pointing fingers. We have the written permission. So thank you for allowing us to actually go through and follow through with that. But yeah, I mean, I would love to hear your thoughts. Unfortunately, he tries to minimalize.
And with him downplaying all this stuff that he did wrong, it doesn't sound like he's
not learning his lesson.
No, he doesn't feel sorry for what he did.
I saw a lot of comments about they need to throw the book at him, take away his hunting license, ban him for life, all this stuff. Unfortunately, I don't know if that would solve the problem because he was already trespassing, hunting without a license, and hunting without a tag. He was already doing all the things you want to punish him with. Mm-hmm. I don't think he will obviously be able to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, and it's probably going to end up to him spending a little bit of time in prison.
Maybe.
If I was CJ in this situation, or what I think the best punishment would be, I think he needs to, unfortunately, someone like him, they're not going to learn by getting a slap on the wrist, being told you can't hunt for 5 years, pay this fine if you're able, house arrest, it'll go away after time.
I mean, maybe
that's not going to solve
maybe
anything.
Some community service, maybe some conservation programs that he has to help with.
It's almost like he needs to stay in the public eye is what I was getting at. He needs to work with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources to maybe, it's kind of like the Jordan Belfort thing. Like you committed all these crimes, and we know that if the day we release you, you're just going to keep doing stuff. So how about you work with us to be an example of what not to do? Mm-hmm. CJ and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources,
educate some of that cultural game law breaking culture that we have in a lot of this part of the state and a lot of the whole part of the country, basically.
It's frustrating for guys like us. Here's the thing: does stuff like that happen in the deer woods around here? Of course it does. But when you're trying to do everything right to try and kill that trophy buck, and somebody like CJ comes along and obviously breaks a lot of rules to kill that buck and take that resource away from people who are trying to do it the right way, that's the real crime.
And the people
if you need to feed your family, whatever, all those arguments. But he shot this deer specifically for personal gain, to make money and to become famous and to become, here we are talking about it.
Did we talk about the text messages that they put out in the court case at all?
No, those were all posted online, but basically...
So they posted his text messages between him and his girlfriend,
fiance/girlfriend, and this Corey guy. And the text messages paint out he was completely guilty. There's no way he could backtrack off the text messages. They actually, in the text messages talk about breaking the law.
And talk about selling the deer to purchase a house, I believe. That they can make a whole bunch of money from this to purchase a house, due to whatever living situation they had.
I mean, it's a sad story all around. It's a shame that you have this deer that was able to achieve, and this happens in Ohio a lot. Some of these bucks become legendary, mythical, giant status deer. You got the hole in the horn buck, the Mike Beatty buck, Kaufman buck. You have the C.J. Alexander buck. You have the OG buck from 10 years ago that blew the internet up because it was just
part of the reason
deer.
He got caught in this, because this deer was very visual from where it was. People knew where this deer lived. They saw him. I don't know if it was a major highway, major road.
Right.
But his home territory was near a major road, so people knew exactly where he was.
Right.
Boom.
And they knew his sister's property wasn't close to there.
Boom, CJ shows up with his deer.
And I'm assuming landowners and other people had trail camera pictures of it the day before it got killed, X amount of miles away from where his sister's
I remember
property.
that was immediately one of the things that they talked about. Somebody posted, on the Outdoor Life article, here is a picture the day before, 26 miles away.
Yeah. And there was a lot of speculation.
I'm pretty sure that's what led to the investigation of all this. And then once they got his phone records, it was over from there. I mean, he basically said exactly what he did.
And the frustrating thing is he was replying to me, these replies are being made to us on Instagram where he's minimalizing what he did. And it's after he was pled guilty. Like he pled guilty, and then he came online and was starting to minimalize.
And I hate how he does bring up the 120, 140-inch deer. Like, it doesn't make a huge difference. You're still breaking the law to shoot this deer. Now, I know some states, I don't know if Ohio is one of them, that the fine increases with the size of the deer. Is that one of the things in Ohio?
Yes. Okay. I read that the fines are going to be upwards of $33,000,
It had something to do with the points and the number of inches that increases the fine for poaching that animal.
I actually found one more quote. I replied back to that the last time we talked about, where he's talked about, if you've ever crossed the line, fished without a license, etc. My reply was, some of us love the outdoors enough to make sure we don't violate the laws just in case this happens. With a world record sized deer, you had to have known that there was going to be a lot of questions asked. And I think you have the wrong impression of us and the public. A lot of people wanted your story to be true. Nobody wanted the deer to be poached, taken illegally, whatever the term you want to use. The problem is the stories that you told on public forums just didn't add up. Nobody else made those mistakes but you. And his reply was, I agree. The thing is, though, that... Sorry, it's hard to read this. I gotta slow this down. I agree. The thing is, though, what isn't true about the story. I shot it at 7 yards, terrible shot, left it because I knew it would need time recovered. It the next day, enjoyed the day, didn't take pictures till Corey's girlfriend got off work and got there. Never did they find daytime pictures because I didn't take any. Did I know about the deer last January after I finally ran a camera and killed my deer? Yes. Did I hunt the deer harder than 99% of the people would hunt a deer? Absolutely believe so. I've said openly I shouldn't have told the story I told, but the base of the story is the exact truth. Other than the location, no one hunts around there because of the person who owns the land other than where I was, which was me. I'm sorry, but I'm willing to bet everyone who's hunted long enough has violated a game law, maybe not to their knowledge, but has in some form. I apologize publicly on my Instagram story. I shouldn't have misled people. But I can't do nothing about that now other than tell the actual story and let people make their own decision on what they want to believe, regardless of what people want to say. You never know what a deer is until you have him on the ground. I've killed deer I thought were 160, ended up being high 140. Did I know he was a huge? Absolutely. Did, but wasn't sure what it was until I scored him myself 3 days after I killed him. I can't change the past. I can only try to make things right in the future and hopefully lead other people and young hunters not to make the same mistakes I did.
So he basically told us that he shot this deer in like a sanctuary, a place where nobody can hunt.
Yeah, he's very fixated on the fact that he didn't spot, to him, it seems like to him, poaching is spotlighting and shooting with a 17 HMR.
Yeah,
or
he
crossbow.
thinks since he shot it legally.
Yeah, he thinks that since he actually was in the woods hunting during daytime hours with a crossbow and killed the deer in that way, that it's okay. Obviously, he admitted that he wasn't where he was supposed to be, didn't have any of the licenses or anything like that. So, no, you didn't spotlight and kill the deer, CJ, but hunting without permission, without a hunting license, without a tag, and then trying to cover all that up after you kill the deer, that is poaching. That's what poaching is.
Mm-hmm. And then the worst part is he tried to profit off of that. He tried to gain a little bit of fame off of that.
Like I said, if your family needed food, you go out there and shoot a couple does without tags, don't post anything on the internet and eat them, people aren't going to be coming down on you as hard as you purposely went out and tried to kill a world record class animal so that you could make enough money and have enough fame to buy a house and become famous.
In a place
you did it in completely the wrong ways.
In a place he knowingly knows that you can't hunt, nobody else can hunt. He kind of justifies that he didn't take the deer from anybody else because nobody could hunt there.
And that is entirely not true.
It's like going into Central Park and shooting. Nobody else can hunt there.
Yeah.
So I'm not stealing this deer from anybody else.
What's the old adage, like that old lady doesn't hunt turkeys, so if I don't go kill it, no one will, so I'm going to cross over the line to kill that turkey. It's sad to me that he doesn't seem to understand what the problem was, and he doesn't seem to understand why the general public is so outraged. I think he obviously has surrounded himself with people who justify this type of behavior his whole life, so it's not a big deal to him. Mm-hmm. And the outcry that he's getting is foreign because he didn't realize how many people do follow the laws. Have we ever walked over a property line to check blood or do this or do that? I'm not going to sit here and say that the majority of hunters haven't done that kind of stuff. we don't sneak into places we're not allowed to hunt and kill a world record deer without a license or a tag, move it, and then go on the internet.
Yeah, I mean,
and brag about
it's
it.
Just
That's
like,
not what's happening here.
It's just like if you kill somebody, he premeditated this, which in the eyes of the law is much worse than like a crime of passion or something of that nature.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just, this is obviously going to be, this is a resolution as far as the legal side of things goes. Obviously, they're going to have the sentencing and all that.
That comes in December, if I remember reading.
Yeah, so it'll be a couple months, and he'll get his sentencing, and there'll be a little blurb about that, I'm sure, and then it'll probably go away unless he goes on Hunter Podcast. I know Hunter Podcast is trying to do a rebuttal, trying to get him back on, I guess, but
and a lot of people, they weren't mad at Hunter Podcast, but they saw that they were baiting him, basically.
I mean, Hunter Podcast knew what they were doing.
Yeah,
they knew exactly what they were doing, which is fine. Freedom of the press, I'm sure we're going to catch some flack for this podcast from certain people, but that's why I wanted to make sure I read Just Outdoor Life, just the court cases, and just our exact conversation with CJ, and then conjectured after that. I mean, this is verbatim from him. I got the screenshot saved.
This is what's in the news right now. This is what we want to talk about.
It's a very interesting case. It's very unfortunate. I hope people, once they listen to this whole story, they kind of have the same maybe outlook that we do, that, it's just sad that he lives in a situation where he thinks all this is okay and he's minimalizing what he did. And
hopefully this can become an example for people, especially people that have no remorse when it comes to breaking game laws. Maybe they'll think twice now. I know that's what they always try to do when they throw the book at these people.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's going to teach people not to put it on the internet. That's for damn sure.
And we've talked about it time and time again. The only thing keeping people from breaking game laws is their own moral values.
Yeah, because
you're not getting caught.
Yeah, you could do a lot of things in the woods and not get caught. And I know it happens. We've always talked about how many gunshots we hear after legal light during gun season. We know this kind of thing happens all the time. We had a turkey poached in front of us this year. Turkey we were hunting was poached. I know we talked about that in the podcast. We've had turkey poachers in the past that we've had to have the law get involved with. That was probably 7-8 years ago.
Yeah, baiting
guy
turkeys.
was baiting turkeys and admitted to killing 3 over a pile of corn on a 2-acre piece of property next to where we could hunt. And the ODNR caught him doing that. We had a deer poach on our farm when we were kids. We were young kids. We found a buck without a head.
I remember that's what kind of sticks with me after all these years. We were just starting hunting.
Yeah.
Probably never even seen a buck when we were hunting.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. Then we're walking back in the woods and we find this giant-bodied deer.
I always wanted to see the rack, and we never
right
got
off.
to see it.
And the guy ended up getting caught.
Yeah, the guy did get caught. He parked at the end of the road and was walking everyone's woods. Just literally shot this monster buck and cut right from the right underneath the head, right underneath the chin here. Just
there's something,
didn't save any meat at all.
There's something eerie about seeing a giant body deer with just his head chopped off right at the jawline. It's just an eerie sight.
Yeah, it sucked. When we were little kids, it was like the end of the world for us. And if it happened now, I'd be even more mad probably.
But at that time, we're like, oh, he shot the only big buck we'll ever see. We didn't know how things worked.
Yeah. It was very unfortunate.
And he ended up getting caught because he got pulled over for his car breaking down, and they found a shotgun in the back seat or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, I got to try to talk to Dad about how they actually caught him.
Because we were young, like really young.
He did get caught. And it's just sad. I mean, these poaching cases become really big talking points on social media and stuff. And I know this is going to be one of many, many, many videos on the CJ Alexander thing. But
I've already seen. Did you watch or listen to the Hunting Beast one? They just did a big podcast on this. It came out yesterday.
Yet. Nope, haven't had time. I've been so fucking busy that I haven't had time to do anything.
I didn't have the hour and a half to sit there and listen.
We're leaving. We're leaving for Kentucky sometime in the next couple hours to hunt for the weekend, and I have nothing packed. But we needed to get this podcast in, episode 65. We've had a couple comments on people that have been, more people are getting exposed to the podcast because we did some broad topics like the EHD one.
They got quite the reach especially on YouTube, quite the reach.
And then the CJ Alexander one from before was getting a lot of reach. The Booner one with Tyler Gullett was getting some reach. And then we have our own, we have our podcast, The Weeks, where we just talk about our own stuff. And we had some guys commenting on there like, I had to turn this shit off. Like, you guys never got to the point. What is this crap? And I replied back to the guy. I was like, it literally states our hunting season so far, basically, in the title.
The podcast is called The Deer Shop Podcast. We're in the deer shop.
Talking about deer stuff.
Yeah, we're just podcasting about what we talk about.
So for the audience that might be watching because they saw CJ Alexander, it's a clickbait type episode, the Deer Shop Podcast is a continuation of our Siman Brothers Outdoors YouTube channel and our group of friends we've been filming stuff with for
long time,
15, 16 years now. And the Deer Camp Chronicles is our main show every fall that we put on there. Very high quality, retelling of what we're doing story wise. We're traveling all over hunting deer, going to multiple deer camps, have a deer camp here at home.
And we just wanted to start a dialogue to where we can sit around and talk about that without making a long, boring 2-hour video of our hunting.
Yeah,
with that added in there.
Unfortunately, people are going. Since we're on YouTube and we're just as accessible as the hunting public, the hunting beast, Seek One, Hunter.
They're going to compare
working class bow hunter. They're going to compare us to all those podcasts and shows and be like, well, you guys suck compared to them. Why don't you have good guests? Like, how hard it'd be to find 52 good guests to have on once a week throughout an entire year. We each work 2 jobs, on top of trying to do this stuff full time. I mean, it's just not possible. So we do get on what we can when we can.
We try to do what's relevant to what's going on in the hunting world, what's going on with our world.
Yeah, 7 to 10 times a year we're going to get a good guest on that's going to be a good public topic. 20 times a year we're going to be talking about tactics as related to what we've experienced, and then another 20 times a year we're going to be talking about our own hunting adventures. And that's just the way this podcast is going to go. But we do appreciate you listening for the CJ Alexander stuff. We hope you stick around and, subscribe to the channel. And,
if you see this video or listen to this, check out our other videos.
Yeah, check out.
You can see what we've been about for the past 10 years. We filmed everything along the way.
And check out some of our other podcasts. Browse through the playlist, and there might be some stuff in there you like. But we wanted to do this one justice. I'm sure we might have at the beginning of next week's. We got a lot of stuff to cover next week, by the way. So for the main audience that's still listening, our people, we got to talk about Alex Artarakis' buck he killed. We're going to talk about this Kentucky trip.
Which hopefully there's a lot to share from that.
We've had a lot of good days in the woods. I'm sure CJ is going to rebuttal to this online, so we'll have his reaction. Matt Pavlik killed a deer. The washed up has been. What is the other terms we use?
I can't remember. He's the graybeard now. But
graybeard.
He called his shot last night and shot a
Matt
probably
Pavlik
150.
Called his shot. Said at 6:37 tonight, I'm going to shoot 150-inch buck, and he sent a snap at like 6:45.
So
arrow missing.
He had that deer patterned.
He called his fucking shot. So he had to do something legendary because I was giving him beef. So what were you talking about? That a little bit. Hopefully there's some more dead bucks in the shop. Alex's was in here, but hopefully we kill one of our hit list bucks here soon. And
slow week for us coming up because it's going to be warm, south winds, southeast winds.
Me and Ethan are peacing out to Kentucky.
I might sneak out for a hunt or two. We'll see.
But that's the Deer Shot Podcast. That's what's coming down the pike. Thank you for listening. We're out.
Deer Shot Podcast out.